The fluorescent lights of the university library flickered above me as I hunched over my laptop, my shoulders screaming in protest. It was nearly midnight on a Thursday, and I'd been in the same position for the past 6 hours, frantically typing my senior thesis on modern architectural design. My neck felt like someone had replaced my vertebrae with concrete blocks, and a dull, throbbing pain radiated down my spine. I was 23 years old in my final semester at Portland State University, and everything in my life felt like it was simultaneously coming together and falling apart. My thesis was due in 2 weeks. I was working 20 hours a week at a coffee shop to make rent, and I hadn't had a proper night's sleep in what felt like months. But none of that compared to the complicated, confusing feelings I'd been having about my roommate, Daniel. Daniel Torres had moved into the spare room of my apartment 8 months ago, responding to my Craigslist ad for a roommate after my previous one had graduated and moved back to California. I remember the day he showed up for the apartment viewing, tall, with dark curly hair that always looked perfectly messy, warm brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled, and an easy confidence that made everyone around him feel comfortable. He was 25, working as a physical therapist at a sports medicine clinic downtown, and he had this laugh that could light up an entire room. From day one, we'd clicked, not just as roommates but as genuine friends. We'd stay up late watching terrible reality TV shows, cook elaborate dinners together on weekends, and have those deep, meaningful conversations at 2 in the morning that somehow feel impossible during daylight hours. Daniel was straight, or at least that's what I'd assumed. He'd mentioned an ex-girlfriend a few times, talked about women he found attractive, lived his life in a way that screamed heterosexual male in every conventional sense. And me, I'd known I was gay since I was 16, but I wasn't exactly walking around with a rainbow flag. I'd come out to my close friends and family, but I wasn't the type to make it my entire personality. I dated a few guys in college, had a semi-serious relationship my sophomore year that ended amicably, and generally tried to live my life without making a big deal about my sexuality. It just was what it was. But Daniel was different. Over the past few months, I developed feelings that went far beyond platonic friendship, and I hated myself for it. It was such a cliché, the gay guy falling for his straight roommate. I felt like I was living in some bad romantic comedy, except there was nothing funny about the constant ache in my chest every time he walked into the room shirtless, or the way my heart would skip when he'd casually touch my shoulder while reaching for something in the kitchen. I'd tried everything to suppress these feelings. I'd gone on dates with other guys, thrown myself into my schoolwork, even considered finding a new apartment once I graduated. But nothing worked. Daniel had become my best friend, and somewhere along the way, I'd fallen completely, hopelessly in love with him. The library lights flickered again, bringing me back to the present and the excruciating pain in my shoulders. I saved my document, shut my laptop, and started packing up my things. The walk home was only 15 minutes, but tonight it felt like miles. Each step sent a jolt of pain through my upper back. When I finally made it to our third-floor apartment, I could hear music playing softly from inside, Daniel's playlist of indie folk songs he loved to listen to while reading. I fumbled with my keys, pushed open the door, and found him sprawled on our second-hand couch, a book in one hand and a beer in the other. "Hey man," he said, looking up with that smile that never failed to make my stomach flip. "You look absolutely wrecked, long night." "You have no idea," I groaned, dropping my backpack by the door and rolling my shoulders in a futile attempt to relieve the tension. "I think I've permanently damaged my spine hunching over that laptop." Daniel set down his book and beer, sitting up straighter. His expression shifted from casual concern to professional assessment. I'd seen him slip into physical therapist mode before, usually when one of our friends complained about an injury. "How bad is it?" he asked, on a scale of 1 to 10. "Solid 8, I admitted, reaching back to try and massage my own shoulder blade. "Maybe 9, I don't know anymore, everything just hurts." "Come here," Daniel said, patting the cushion next to him. "Sit down before you collapse." I shuffled over and sank onto the couch with a groan that was probably more dramatic than necessary but genuinely reflected how I felt. Daniel shifted behind me, and I felt his hands, large, warm, capable hands that I'd thought about far too often, rest gently on my shoulders. "Jesus, Ryan," he said, his fingers pressing lightly against the knots in my muscles. "You're completely locked up. This is bad, man, like really bad." "I know," I said miserably. "I've been sitting in the same position for hours every day this week. The thesis is killing me." "Well, it's literally going to kill you if you keep treating your body like this," Daniel said, his thumbs working in small circles against my shoulder blades. Even through my thick hoodie, I could feel the pressure, and it was simultaneously painful and the best thing I'd felt in days. You need to take better care of yourself. Easy for you to say, I muttered. You're not trying to finish a 50-page thesis while working part-time and surviving on coffee and anxiety. Daniel chuckled, but I could hear the concern in his voice. You know what you need? A proper massage, and I don't mean the sad self-massage thing you were just attempting. I mean a real, professional-grade massage from someone who actually knows what they're doing. My heart started racing, but I forced my voice to stay casual. Are you offering? Because I'm pretty sure I can't afford your clinic's rates. Roommate discount, Daniel said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Also known as free because you're my friend and you look like you're about to snap in half. This was dangerous territory and I knew it. The thought of Daniel's hands on me, really on me, without layers of clothing between us was something I'd fantasized about more times than I cared to admit. But this was different. This was real. This was happening. I don't want to impose, I said weakly, even though every fiber of my being was screaming at me to accept. You're not imposing, I'm offering. Go take a quick shower to warm up your muscles and then we'll do this properly. Trust me, you'll feel like a new person. I sat there for a moment, frozen between desire and common sense, between what I wanted and what I knew was probably a terrible idea. But the pain in my shoulders won out over my better judgment. Okay, I said finally. Yeah, thank you, that would be amazing. Go on then, Daniel said, giving my shoulders one final squeeze before releasing me. I'll set everything up. I practically fled to the bathroom, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribcage. As I stood under the hot shower spray, I tried to give myself a stern talking to. This was just a massage. Daniel gave massages all day long as part of his job. It didn't mean anything. He was being a good friend, a good roommate. I needed to get my head out of the gutter and my feelings under control. But as the hot water pounded against my aching muscles, I couldn't shake the nervous excitement that bubbled up inside me. I couldn't stop thinking about his hands, his voice, the way he'd said trust me like it was the most natural thing in the world. When I finally shut off the water and dried myself, I realized I had no idea what to wear for this massage. Boxers, shorts, a towel. I settled on my loosest pair of athletic shorts and a t-shirt, figuring I could adjust based on what Daniel suggested. When I emerged from the bathroom, steam following me like a cloud, I found that Daniel had transformed our living room. He'd pushed the coffee table to the side and laid out several thick blankets on the floor, creating a makeshift massage table. The overhead lights were off, replaced by the soft glow of the lamp in the corner and a few candles he'd lit on the bookshelf. The music had changed too. Now it was something instrumental and soothing, all gentle piano and strings. Wow, I said, taking in the scene, you really went all out. Daniel looked up from where he was arranging pillows and I caught something in his expression that I couldn't quite read. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right, he said. How are you feeling? Any looser after the shower? A little, I admitted. Still pretty tight though. That's okay, we'll work through it. Daniel stood up, brushing off his hands on his jeans. He changed too, I noticed. He was wearing a fitted t-shirt that showed off the lean muscles of his arms and chest. As a physical therapist, Daniel was in excellent shape and I'd spent many inappropriate moments admiring his physique. Tonight was going to be torture in the best and worst possible ways. So, how does this work? I asked, hovering awkwardly near the makeshift massage area. Well, normally I'd have you lie face down on a proper table, but this will work just fine, Daniel said, his voice slipping into that professional, calm tone he used at work. The blankets should be comfortable enough. You can keep your shorts on, but you'll want to take off your shirt so I can really work on your back and shoulders. My mouth went dry, of course. Of course that made perfect sense. Professional massages involved, actually touching skin, but the thought of being shirtless, vulnerable under Daniel's hands. Right, I said, trying to sound normal, makes sense. I pulled off my t-shirt, hyper-aware of every imperfection of my body. I wasn't in bad shape, I ran occasionally and did enough push-ups to not be completely pathetic, but I wasn't a physical therapist who spent his days working with athletes. I felt exposed, vulnerable as I lowered myself onto the blankets, lying face down with my arms at my sides. Comfortable? Daniel asked, and I felt him kneel down beside me. Yeah, I said, my voice muffled by the pillow I'd positioned under my head. Good, I'm going to use some massage oil, okay? It'll help reduce friction, it might be a little cold at first. Okay, I said, and then I felt it. his hands warm despite the cool oil making contact with my upper back. For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. "Try to relax," Daniel said softly, his palms sliding across my shoulders in long, smooth strokes. "I know it's weird at first having someone work on you like this, but I need you to let go of the tension. Take a deep breath in and out." I followed his instructions, trying to focus on my breathing instead of the fact that my crush was touching me, his hands moving with practiced confidence across my skin. The oil smelled like lavender and eucalyptus, and the combination of the scent, the candlelight, and the music was almost overwhelmingly sensual. "Okay, I'm going to start really working now," Daniel said. "It might hurt a little at first, especially where you're really locked up, but pain is how we know we're making progress. If it's too much, just tell me and I'll ease up." "Got it," I managed to say. And then his thumbs pressed down into the space between my shoulder blades, and I couldn't hold back a groan. "Sorry," Daniel said immediately. "Too much." "No," I gasped. "No, it's good, it hurts, but in a good way, keep going." Daniel continued his work, his hands moving with purpose and skill. He worked his way across my upper back, finding every knot, every point of tension, and systematically addressing it. His fingers dug into muscles I didn't even know existed, and I found myself making sounds I normally would have been embarrassed about, groans and sighs and little gasps when he hit a particularly tender spot. "You really weren't kidding about being locked up," Daniel said, his voice low and focused. "I can feel years of stress in here. When's the last time you had any body work done?" "Never," I admitted. "I've never had a professional massage before." "Never?" Daniel sounded genuinely shocked. "Ryan, man, you really need to take better care of yourself." His hands slid lower, working along my spine, and I felt myself starting to relax despite my nervousness. There was something almost meditative about it, the rhythm of his movements, the steady pressure, the way he seemed to know exactly where to touch and how much pressure to apply. "This is amazing," I murmured, my eyes drifting closed. "I had no idea. I mean, I knew you were good at your job, but this is—" "Just wait," Daniel said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "We're just getting started." He worked in silence for a while, and I let myself drift, focusing on the sensation of his hands on my body, the way he was literally unknotting months of accumulated stress and tension. It was intimate in a way I hadn't anticipated, not sexual exactly, but deeply personal. He was taking care of me, attending to my body with a focus and dedication that made my chest ache with feelings I couldn't name. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said suddenly, his hands pausing in their movements. My heart jumped into my throat. "Sure," I said, trying to sound casual. "Are you happy? I mean, in general, I know the thesis is stressing you out, but beyond that, are you okay?" The question caught me completely off guard. I opened my eyes, staring at the pillow beneath my face, wondering how to answer. The truth was complicated. I was happy in many ways. I loved my field of study. I had great friends. I was about to graduate and start my career. But I was also carrying this secret weight, these feelings for Daniel that I couldn't express, that colored everything else in my life. "I'm okay," I said finally. "Why do you ask?" Daniel's hands resumed their work, moving to my lower back now. "I don't know, sometimes I worry about you. You work so hard, you're always stressed, you don't really date much. I just want to make sure you're taking care of yourself, not just physically but emotionally too." I felt a lump forming in my throat. Of course Daniel would notice. Of course he would care. That was just who he was, thoughtful, attentive, genuinely concerned about the people in his life. "I'm fine," I lied, "just focused on getting through this semester. After graduation I'll have more time for other things." "Other things like dating?" Daniel asked, and there was something in his tone I couldn't quite identify. "When's the last time you went on a date?" A few months ago," I tried to remember. "I went out with this guy I met at the coffee shop. It was fine, but there wasn't really a connection." Daniel said, and his hands moved back up to my shoulders, working on a particularly stubborn knot. "What's your type, if you don't mind me asking?" This was getting into dangerous territory, but I was too relaxed, too vulnerable to deflect properly. "I don't know if I really have a type," I said. "I mean, there are things I'm attracted to, obviously, but it's more about the person than any specific physical characteristics." "Like what?" Daniel pressed. "What are you attracted to?" His hands were working magic on my shoulders, and between the physical sensation and the emotional intimacy of the conversation, I felt my defenses crumbling. "I don't know, kindness, I guess, intelligence, someone who makes me laugh, someone who's comfortable in their own skin." I paused, then added quietly, someone who sees me really sees me. Daniel was quiet for a moment, his hands moving in slow, thoughtful circles on my back. That's beautiful, he said finally. And that guy from the coffee shop, he didn't see you. No, I said, he saw a version of me, the surface stuff, but he didn't. He wasn't interested in anything deeper. Then he was an idiot, Daniel said firmly, and the conviction in his voice made my heart ache. You're one of the most interesting people I know, Ryan. Anyone who doesn't see that isn't worth your time. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just lay there, feeling his hands on my body, feeling his words settle into my chest like warm stones. Okay, flip over, Daniel said suddenly. I need to work on your chest and shoulders from the front. Panic flared through me. Face up meant he'd be able to see my face, see any reactions I might have. There'd be nowhere to hide. But I couldn't refuse without seeming weird, so I carefully rolled over, keeping my eyes fixed on the ceiling. The view was different from this angle. Daniel was kneeling beside me, his face illuminated by the soft candlelight, his expression focused and serious. Our eyes met for just a moment, and something passed between us, something I couldn't name but felt all the way down to my bones. This might feel a little weird at first, Daniel said, reaching for the massage oil again, but I promise it'll help with the tension you're carrying in your chest and neck. He warmed the oil between his palms, then placed his hands on my chest just below my collarbones. I had to concentrate on not reacting, on keeping my breathing steady, on acting like this was completely normal and not the most intense physical contact I'd had in months. Daniel's hands worked across my pectoral muscles, his thumbs pressing into points of tension I didn't even know existed. It was strange. Being touched this way, clinical and professional, but also undeniably intimate. I could feel the calluses on his palms, the strength in his fingers, the heat of his body so close to mine. You carry a lot of stress here, Daniel said, his hands moving to my shoulders. Right in your chest. It's pretty common, especially for people who spend a lot of time hunched over computers. Makes sense, I managed to say, my voice coming out rougher than I intended. Daniel worked in silence for a while, his movements sure and practiced. But there was something different in the air now, a tension that hadn't been there when I was lying face down. Maybe it was just my imagination, my own feelings projecting onto the situation, but I could have sworn Daniel's breath had quickened slightly, that his movements had become just a fraction less clinical. Ryan, he said suddenly, his hands stilling on my shoulders, can I tell you something? My heart stopped, of course. Daniel took a breath, and for the first time since the massage started, he seemed uncertain. This is going to sound weird and maybe I'm completely off base here, but have you ever felt like you were lying to someone important to you, not intentionally, not maliciously, but just by omission, by not saying something you should have said? I stared up at him, my pulse racing. Yeah, I said carefully, yeah, I have. It's been eating at me, Daniel said, his hands still resting on my shoulders, his brown eyes searching mine. Because you're important to me, Ryan, you're one of my best friends, and I feel like I haven't been completely honest with you, and that's not fair to you. What do you mean? I asked, barely breathing. Daniel's jaw worked like he was trying to find the right words. The thing is, when you moved in, when we first became roommates, I thought I had everything figured out. I thought I knew who I was, what I wanted. But these past few months, he paused, his thumbs unconsciously rubbing small circles on my shoulders. You've made me question a lot of things about myself. I couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely process what he was saying. I think, Daniel started, then stopped. No, I know that I'm attracted to you, Ryan, and I have been for a while now, and I don't know what to do about it. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I must have heard wrong. I must be hallucinating or dreaming or having some kind of stress-induced breakdown. What? I whispered. I'm attracted to you, Daniel repeated, his voice stronger now, more certain. I've tried to ignore it, tried to explain it away, tried to convince myself it was just friendship or admiration or I don't even know what. But tonight, touching you like this, taking care of you, I can't pretend anymore. But I started, my mind reeling. You're straight, you had a girlfriend, you've never. I thought I was straight, Daniel corrected gently, but sexuality isn't always black and white, is it? I'm starting to realize that maybe I'm somewhere in the middle, or maybe, he took a shaky breath. Maybe I'm just attracted to you specifically. I don't have all the answers yet. All I know is that when I'm with you, I feel something I've never felt with anyone else. I lay there staring up at him, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break free of my chest. "How long?" I managed to ask. "How long have you felt this way?" Daniel smiled ruefully. "Remember that night about 3 months ago when we stayed up until 4 in the morning talking about our dreams and fears and all that deep stuff?" I nodded. I remembered that night vividly. It was one of my favorite memories, sitting on this same couch, sharing things I'd never told anyone else. "That's when I knew," Daniel said. "That's when I realized that what I felt for you went way beyond friendship. The way you talked about architecture, about wanting to design spaces that make people feel safe and seen, the passion in your eyes, the vulnerability. I wanted to kiss you so badly it physically hurt." "Why didn't you?" I whispered. "Because I was terrified," Daniel admitted. "Because I didn't know if you felt the same way. Because I was still trying to figure out what it meant about me, about my identity. Because I was scared of ruining our friendship, our living situation, everything." "And now?" I asked, my voice barely audible. Daniel's hands moved from my shoulders to cup my face, his thumbs brushing across my cheekbones with heartbreaking tenderness. "Now I'm still terrified," he said, "but I'm more scared of not telling you, of letting this moment pass, of spending the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to be honest." "I'm attracted to you too," I blurted out, the words tumbling over each other in their rush to escape. "God, Daniel, I've been attracted to you since the day you moved in. I've been trying so hard not to feel this way, trying not to fall for my straight roommate like some ridiculous cliché, but I couldn't help it. I think I might be in love with you." The confession hung in the air between us, and for a moment neither of us moved. Then Daniel smiled, really smiled, with his whole face, the kind of smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and showed all his teeth. "Thank God," he breathed, and then he was leaning down, closing the distance between us, and our lips met. The kiss was gentle at first, almost hesitant, like we were both testing the waters, making sure this was real. Daniel's lips were soft and warm, and he tasted like the beer he'd been drinking earlier. My hands came up to tangle in his hair, and I felt him sigh against my mouth, the sound sending shivers down my spine. Then something shifted, and the kiss deepened. Daniel's tongue traced the seam of my lips, and I opened for him, both of us groaning at the contact. His hands were everywhere in my hair, on my face, sliding down my sides, and I arched up into him, desperate to be closer, to feel more. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Daniel rested his forehead against mine, his eyes dark and intense. "I've wanted to do that for so long," he murmured. "Me too," I said, my voice shaky. "I can't believe this is actually happening." "Believe it," Daniel said, pressing another quick kiss to my lips. "Because I'm not going anywhere, unless—" he pulled back slightly, concern flickering across his face. "Unless this is too fast or too much, we can slow down if you need to. I don't want to rush you into anything." I laughed, the sound coming out almost giddy with relief and joy. "Daniel, I've been fantasizing about this for 8 months. You're not rushing me into anything." He grinned. "8 months, huh? So basically since I moved in." "Basically," I admitted. "You walked into the apartment for the viewing, smiled at me, and I was done for." It was pathetic, really. "Not pathetic," Daniel said firmly, settling down beside me on the blankets, propping himself up on one elbow so he could look down at me. "Sweet. And for the record, I think I was attracted to you from the beginning too. I just didn't recognize it for what it was. I thought you were handsome, thought you had a great laugh, loved talking to you. But I'd always been attracted to women, so I just assumed that's what friendship felt like when you really connect with someone." "And now?" I asked, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw with my fingertips. "Now I know better," Daniel said, turning his head to press a kiss to my palm. "Now I know that what I feel for you is definitely not just friendship." We lay there together on the makeshift massage area, the candles burning low around us, the music still playing softly in the background. I felt like I'd stepped into an alternate reality, one where my feelings weren't hopeless and one-sided, where the guy I'd fallen for felt the same way. "So what happens now?" I asked eventually. "I mean, we're roommates, things are going to be different." "Things are already different," Daniel pointed out, "but in a good way. At least I hope you think it's good." "Are you kidding?" I said, unable to keep the smile off my face. "This is the best thing that's happened to me in, maybe ever." Daniel laughed, the sound warm and full of relief. "Okay, good, because I was worried I'd just made the most epic mistake of my life." "The only mistake," I said, feeling bold, "would have been not telling me how you felt." Noted, Daniel said, leaning down to kiss me again. This kiss was slower, sweeter, full of promise and possibility. When we finally pulled apart, I glanced at the clock on the wall and was shocked to see it was after 2 in the morning. We should probably get some actual sleep, I said reluctantly. I have class in the morning and you have work. Probably, Daniel agreed, but he made no move to get up. But I'm really comfortable right here. Me too, I admitted, although the floor is going to wreck my back even more if we sleep here all night. Daniel groaned, "You're right, come on, let's clean this up and head to bed." We stood up together and I was immediately aware of how close we were standing, how easy it would be to reach out and touch him again. The energy between us had shifted completely. What had been comfortable friendship before now had an undercurrent of electricity, of anticipation. As we blew out the candles and folded up the blankets, moving around each other in the familiar space of our apartment, I kept stealing glances at Daniel, still half convinced this was all a dream. But every time our eyes met, he'd smile at me with that warm, genuine expression that made my heart skip, and I knew it was real. "So," Daniel said as we stood in the hallway between our bedrooms, "I'll see you tomorrow." "We live together," I pointed out with a laugh, "so yes, definitely." "Right," Daniel said, looking almost sheepish. I don't want to assume anything about where we go from here, about what you want." I stepped closer, closing the distance between us. "I want to see where this goes," I said honestly. "I want to explore whatever this is between us, but I also want to be smart about it. We're roommates, and if things don't work out romantically." "They will," Daniel said with surprising confidence. "But I understand what you're saying. We should probably take things slow, get to know each other in this new context." "Exactly," I said, relieved that he understood. Although, Daniel prompted, his hand coming up to rest on my waist. "Although I wouldn't say no to a good-night kiss," I finished, feeling my cheeks heat. Daniel grinned. "Well, we can't have you going to bed disappointed." He kissed me again, and it was somehow even better than the first time, less desperate, more sure, full of promise. When we finally broke apart, we were both smiling like idiots. "Good night, Ryan," Daniel murmured. "Good night, Daniel," I said back. We retreated to our separate bedrooms, but I lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the evening. My shoulders still ached slightly from all the tension I'd been carrying, but my heart felt lighter than it had in months. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, figuring out what we were to each other, how to navigate this shift in our relationship, what it meant for both of us in terms of our identities and our futures. But tonight, I let myself just feel happy, just feel hopeful. I woke up the next morning to the smell of coffee and bacon, and for a moment I thought I'd dreamed the entire previous night. But then I heard Daniel humming in the kitchen and memories flooded back, his hands on my skin, his lips on mine, his confession that he was attracted to me. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and checked the time, 8:47 a.m. I'd somehow managed to get 6 hours of sleep, which was more than I'd gotten in days. My thesis deadline was looming, but for the first time in weeks it didn't feel like the end of the world. Everything felt different, colored by the possibilities of what had happened with Daniel. I rolled out of bed, pulled on a pair of sweatpants and a t-shirt, and padded out to the kitchen, my heart beating faster with each step. What would this morning be like? Would things be awkward? Would Daniel have regrets? But when I stepped into the kitchen, Daniel looked up from the stove with a smile so warm and genuine that all my anxieties melted away. "Morning," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "How'd you sleep?" "Better than I have in weeks," I admitted, moving to pour myself a cup of coffee. "You?" "Like a rock," Daniel said, flipping a piece of bacon in the pan. "I think finally being honest about my feelings was better than therapy. All that stress I'd been carrying around just evaporated." I leaned against the counter, cradling my coffee mug, watching him cook. He was wearing old jeans and a faded t-shirt from his physical therapy program. His hair was still messy from sleep, and he looked absolutely perfect. "So," I said carefully, "about last night." Daniel turned to face me fully, his expression open and sincere. "No regrets," he said immediately. "In case you were wondering, I meant everything I said." "I wasn't wondering," I lied, and Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Okay, you were totally wondering," he said with a laugh. "Which is fair. This is new territory for both of us, but I want to be really clear. I don't regret kissing you, I don't regret telling you how I feel. The only thing I regret is not doing it sooner. I felt a huge weight lift off my chest. I don't have any regrets either, I said, except maybe that I have to go to class this morning instead of spending the day figuring out what all of this means. Daniel grinned. What time is your class? 10:30. Architectural Theory and Criticism. Should be a riveting 3 hours. Brutal, Daniel sympathized, turning back to the stove to plate up the bacon and eggs he'd been cooking. I don't have to be at the clinic until noon today. I was thinking, if you want, we could have dinner together tonight, like a real dinner, maybe go out somewhere. My heart skipped. Like a date. Yeah, Daniel said, a slight pink flush creeping up his neck. Like a date if you want to, no pressure. I want to, I said immediately. I really, really want to. Daniel's face lit up. Yeah. Yeah, I confirmed, moving closer to him. Although I have to warn you, I'm probably going to be a terrible date. I'll be exhausted from class and stressed about my thesis, and… Daniel cut me off by leaning down and kissing me gently. You could never be a terrible date, he said against my lips. And we don't have to go anywhere fancy. We could just order takeout and eat on the couch if that's more your speed. That sounds perfect, I murmured, kissing him again. We ate breakfast together at our small dining table, and it felt both exactly the same as always and completely different. We talked about our plans for the day, about Daniel's patients at the clinic, about my thesis progress. But underneath the ordinary conversation was this current of excitement, of anticipation, of promise. When I finally had to leave for class, Daniel walked me to the door like he always did, but this time he pulled me in for a kiss that left me breathless.